there's a poem that's been in my mind. I'm going to share with you to launch this talk. It's called "Let This Darkness Be a Bell Tower" by Rainer Maria Rilke. Yeah. And it's just translated by Joanna Macy. See if you can hear your practice. Here it is. Listen, quiet friend who has come so far. Feel how your breathing makes more space around you. Let this darkness be a bell tower, and you, the bell. As you ring, what batters you becomes your strength. Move back and forth into the change. What is it like, such intensity of pain? If the drink is bitter, turn yourself to wine. In this uncontainable night, be the mystery at the crossroads of your senses, the meaning discovered there. And if the world has ceased to hear you, say to the silent earth, I flow. To the rushing water, speak, I am. So, this poem came to mind after I actually heard a talk by Valerie, after she'd heard a talk from the guiding teacher at the Albuquerque Zen Center, Zhanji. And it really made me think, as a writer, as a singer, songwriter, as a lover of words in this wordless practice, that we often look to poems and songs for comfort and for guidance. So just referencing Valerie's recent talk, I think it was a few weeks ago, she noted that that Zhangji had mentioned that poetry and koans, our koans in our practice, can bring us to this don't know mind. She quoted her saying that good poetry cuts through the overused mind road, well-worn road, I just added that, and gives us something startling and alive. To meet it requires curiosity and courage. Whew. This sounds like our practice. And while we may come to this practice as a way to navigate and maybe try to equilibrate all of the dynamism in our lives, we ultimately are plunged into this fact that they're not two things. Zen invites us to look into this world of not two through the portals of our bodies, these aching, beautiful bodies. Valerie often says this is a whole body practice, and I think that's really important to emphasize. When we open completely in whole body receptivity, when we're willing to see what it's like to really not know, that's when we really have to call in our courage and our curiosity. Why courage and curiosity? Because when we experience and witness this world as too difficult or unfair or unjust, cruel, nonsensical, frustrating, or unfigure-outable, we instinctively want to close up. It's kind of built into us, right? To shore up against the unpleasantness. We might want answers. We might want to know what's happening and what to do to fix it. Or we might want to hide. Or on different days, different responses. And they're very understandable. And yet if we act on them, it could deny us a great opportunity to discover what might happen if we don't engage in this sort of fight or flight systems, these sort of flight or flight systems. So back to words, where do they come in? I mean, our language is dualistic by nature. And it's used often, maybe endlessly, it feels sometimes, in a self-perpetuating and unwholesome division, helping us fortify this protection instinct that comes in a very convenient form that we see and hear, us versus them. Again, with referencing Valerie's talk a few weeks ago, she invited us to view turning words, koans, chants, poetry as a way to partake, and I loved this, in a word vaccine. That's been staying with me quite a bit. So these gatherings of words that we're talking about, right? They're carefully crafted in unconventional ways, ways in which that same fight or flight mind really might not be able or usually can't directly fathom, but our heart and our gut, our hara, they're wide open. They receive them right away. Portals into our less guarded and more all-inclusive being. And some part of us recognizes a level that's far beyond our conceptual reach. Zen might call these pointing words. And if they have the effect of shaking off this sort of tight I, me, my veil or capsule of being a separate self in some of these gracious moments of clear seeing, they can be called turning words. We're here to discover what those words are pointing to. Our original face, full of constant freshness, endless potential, and amazingly, counterintuitively, I suppose, to the conditioned mind, not knowing what will happen next with our lives, the lives of others, the state of the planet and her peoples and her beings. That's ground zero for this discovery. And thus, our liberation, everyone's liberation. So I'm hoping this talk can help us look a little bit into how this can be so. I'm also hoping it'll reinforce the importance and value of our committed practice during a time when there is a sense of particularly heightened unease, collective unease. I almost titled this talk, "The Land of the Free." I mean, it is this land where this liberation is a fact, this native ground, home of the, I hope I pronounced this right, of the Ogapoge Owinge. Thank you, Bill, for teaching me this, the white shell water place, the unceded ancestral lands of the Tewa people. You can feel it. And it's also Florida and Gaza and Ukraine and Sudan and El Salvador and the oil derricks between Bakersfield, California and Sequoia National Forest. And right where we sit, right here, right now. So, let's look into this world of not knowing and our freedom. I'd like to also mention somebody in our Florida Sambo Zen group who really put a seed of exploration in me, a longtime fellow practitioner, Bob Kolb. He'll be here in September, and he gave a practice sharing talk this past Monday. He addressed a life koan. He asked, how do we practice in the midst of these troubling times? And that could also be perhaps this talk. He mentioned Dogen and pointed out that Dogen actually addressed the same question, a timeless question. And there was a section of the Shobogenzo called On Doing One's Utmost in Practicing the Way of the Buddhas. Dogen referred to, quote, storms and floods. How current is that? He meant the things that threaten to blow us over, particularly current in Florida, or overwhelm us with doubt. So just recalling, Dogen hails from the 13th century, and yet dealing with storms and floods and being blown over, there's no time at all. He says, Dogen said, quote, all who make profitable spiritual use of whatever storms and floods may arise will be receiving guidance and assistance in unseen ways from the profound and inscrutable instructions of Buddhas, plural, and they will give expression to their innate understanding, which is ever intimate with the truth, capital T, truth. In other words, practice Zazen. Our practice invites us. And here's the invitation. When we just don't know what will happen or how we can navigate to a place where not only our own suffering, but the suffering of others can be reconciled, we rest in the place of not knowing. How do we do this? By sitting as we are and cultivating a deep familiarity with this as we are-ness. As we are-ness sounds a lot like awareness. If we're sitting with a koan, if we're sitting with mu, if we're sitting with our breath, or perhaps a genjo koan, like, what is this? Who am I? Where do I come from? We can practice willingly meeting these earnest inquiries with, I don't know, and settling into the sensations, whole body, and experiences that opening into this really not knowing might evoke. So remembering the opening poem, there are a couple of lines I'll just bring back. One says, what is it like, such intensity of pain? I mean, I can describe, maybe it's a level 8 or something like that, but what is it really like? I don't know. Can the pain fully express itself as pain alone? Can our desperation to squelch it be felt just as purely as a pain unto itself? Another line from the poem, if the drink is bitter, turn yourself into wine. How do I do that? I don't know. Can our seeming inability to fix ours and the world's problems, often inextricably connected, right, be held in wide open space frustration and all? Can we open to the entire field of possibility, fixing, not fixing, being as we are, even while entangled? Another line. Say to the silent earth, I flow. How do we flow? I don't know. Can we see flow and not knowing how to flow just by sitting in the wide open river of that? And a final line from the poem, to the rushing water speak, I am. Some yogis might know that as soham, I am. And there it is, the fundamental question of our life and what brings so many of us here to practice. What are you? What am I? Really? And how can we find out? If, as we begin to learn repeatedly that I don't know anything, our practice shows us over and over again the heart of the koan that I'll be bringing up shortly. And it's represented in probably my favorite phrase, not knowing is most intimate. Wanting to know is a noble and wonderful drive, fueled by so many different things. In this joyful and painful thing, life, we feel like knowing will make us more intimate with these things. It calls to mind a whole other story, but I don't have time to tell it. But it's one I'll share in the future, something that brought me to Zen, this knowing and not knowing. Thinking I knew. Well, I'll just briefly say it. It has to do with nature. I got really good at taxonomy. I could name scientific names for all the invertebrates in the Gulf of Mexico. Every single one. I still can. And one day it occurred to me that did absolutely nothing for actually knowing this beautiful world. It's just a list of names. So that's the short version of the story. But it was an attempt at communion, you know. We grow up kind of thinking these things that are outside of us. It's like that story in Ruben Habito Roshi's book, Healing Breath, about the violets. If you get a chance to read it, by labeling it, get closer that way. As if on such, a deeper level, we know that they're not separate from us. We really do know that somehow. So we seek to commune with an illusion, right? Like traveling to another shore that's none other than right where we are. It's the right idea, but because it doesn't work, we suffer. That's actually the thesis of the Four Noble Truths. But thankfully, we have a path, and we have guiding words to point us along the way. So let's get to the koan. Case number 20 of the Shoyuroku, or Book of Serenity. Here's the case. Chizo asked Hogen, Master Hogen. Well, I'm sorry. Master Chizo. This was before Hogen became a master. He said, "Where are you going?" And Hogen said, "I am wandering at random." Or another translation says, going on pilgrimage. And Master Chizo said, "What do you think of wandering?" Or another way it's been expressed, what is the purpose of pilgrimage? Hogen replied, honestly, "I don't know." And Chizo said, not knowing is most intimate. And Hogan was deeply enlightened. So, before briefly unpacking the beauty of this koan, I do want to share a story of another practitioner that I have the honor of working with. Very serious student, and he very recently completed his first full-length sesshin at a Zen center in California. And he's been sitting, he's in the miscellaneous koans. During this sesshin, he was sitting very, very earnestly and immersively with Mu. So he carried this exploration of Mu throughout, the whole sesshin, as we do when we're engaged and immersed and invited to do. And it found him when he was assisting with dish duty for Samu after a meal. So at one point he was assigned to put away a pot. So, you wash and dry, and you have a big pot like this. And he didn't know where it went because he was new. So rather than asking where it belonged, he observed himself very with some fascination, just kind of put it somewhere. At which point, he was sternly corrected and redirected to where it was supposed to go, the proper location. He took this into his practice because on the surface, it seemed like he was simply acting out of this don't know mind. I don't know where this goes, so I'm new here, I'll just put it over in this area right over here. But thanks to his practice, he could see sort of a subtle ruse. On some level, he didn't really want to ask where it belonged. He knew what he was doing in not knowing where it went. And that little bit of ability to observe with curiosity, this sort of subtly defiant choice within this crucible of his practice, allowed freedom to emerge. He felt it. He observed all that exists is a flicker of mischief, a dash of laziness, a clank of a metal pot on the wrong shelf. Even that knowing on some level cannot be known or not known. It's just what it is, functioning as it is in that moment. That's it. You don't know because you can't know. Can you already begin to taste that freedom? And that story, when he shared it with me, I was so grateful. It actually launched the idea for the title of this talk, and which, by the way, is Don't Know, Can't Know, Who Knows? Because even don't know and can't know still have the implication of an I, a relativity, an identity that can or cannot know. To have this level of mindfulness is very liberating indeed. But lucky us, our practice takes us even deeper. To truly not know, to truly be free, who could possibly be there to assess don't know mind and can't know mind, even as body and mind are doing just that? Who knows? So, back to the koan. Shizo is asking Hogan a big question. What is the purpose or meaning of going on a pilgrimage? So historically, it was a common practice in those days for monks, after studying with a particular master, maybe having an opening or enlightenment experience, to journey, sometimes for many years, to visit, study with other masters, to continually clarify and deepen their Dharma eye. But Hogan, who did become one of the greatest masters of our lineage, he founded one of the 5 original schools of Zen is is a beautiful way of expressing the fact in our koans. Yeah, he did not answer in such a way. It's like when the emperor asked Bodhidharma, "Who are you?" I mean, isn't it the same question? Right? What is the purpose of going on pilgrimage? What is the meaning of life? Who are you? Both Bodhidharma and Hogan responded in the same way. I don't know. And the purity of this I don't know. It's not like, I don't know, let me figure it out. It's like drawing from Valerie again, I don't know without an opposite. 13th century Master Dogen that I mentioned earlier, he has a famous practice invitation, think not thinking. We engage a lot of thinking when we want to know things. There's nothing wrong with that, but our complete reality, our complete who we are-ness, also called our essence. I mean, these are just words, but words you'll hear a lot. It can't be figured out or conceived by thinking alone. And as we've already kind of got the gist of, who could possibly be thinking of anything? There's just, I wonder what's for dinner, or I cannot figure out this koan. Yamada Koen Roshi has some beautiful reflections or pointers in relation to this koan. He says, the true essence of pilgrimage cannot be thought out or measured in your head. That's not just limited to pilgrimage. When you stand up, there's just that standing up. Oh, it's so complete. Everything's there. When you sit down, there's just that. When you eat or drink, there's just that. I didn't write this, but suddenly it came to mind, this, when you see a stick, so Yamada Koen Roshi said this? I think so. Just as a stick, your practice is at an end. Never at an end, ever. This is true about everything. The essence can't be fathomed in thought because it is empty. When Chizo said, not knowing is most intimate, in other words, it's one with the essence itself. That not knowing, that's it. Yamada Koen's very incisive, insightful words. It's said that Hogan came to great enlightenment at these turning words, but there's actually more to this story, which ultimately I feel, catapulted Hogan from don't know and can't know out into that stratosphere of who knows. It's, I think, what I aspire to every time I sit. So here's the next part of the story. After this famous exchange that we shared here in the koan, Chizo then accompanied Hogan to the gate of the monastery, to see him off on his pilgrimage. And there was a large stone nearby, maybe some like the boulders we have out here. And he pointed to it and he asked Hogan, he said, "You monks usually say the whole universe is just one mind. Just tell me, is this stone within the mind or outside the mind?" You always know there's something, when you have to pick either or. Hogan knew very well that to say that it's outside the mind was not it. And there's no separation after all, right? So he replied, within the mind. There was still a trace of I, me, my there too, though, right? A mind to hold something in. Me and that boulder must not be two. So it's in here. A knowing. But Master Chizo didn't miss a beat. And he responded, it will be awfully difficult for you to travel around on pilgrimage with such a big stone inside of you. Hogan immediately at that point canceled his pilgrimage and stayed with Master Chizo. He actually went on to become Chizo's Dharma successor, and then, the rest of the story. Great master. And his great realization has been described as the bottom falling out from a bucket. What did he realize? Well, bringing back Yamada Kon Roshi's insight, he's very clear. He said, oh, exclamation point. It contains everything. Oh, nothing at all from the start. That's what he realized. So, this life as a pilgrimage, it really is, isn't it? I mean, we're on pilgrimage. All of our questions are just like Chizo's or Hogan's. What's the reason for it? What's the meaning of it? And for that matter, why can it be so difficult? And what many of us are really, really grappling with right now, why are so many suffering? So, here's where it gets so astonishing. What if we didn't have to know the answers to these questions, these burning questions? What if we could get curious about meeting not knowing instead? Can't you already feel the courage that's required? This is the great gift and ultimately a supreme relief of our practice. It's the ground of our being. So we chanted the identity of relative and absolute, Sandakai, in our group 2 weeks ago, and these 4 lines just jumped out at me. They go, the spiritual source shines clear in the light. The branching streams flow on in the dark. Grasping at things is surely delusion. According with things is still not enlightenment. What Shakyamuni Buddha discovered, and what we sit to wake up to over and over again as our true nature, it's beyond knowing, not knowing. It's beyond questions and answers, problems and solutions, oneness and emptiness, and it's even beyond meaning, because it's already so. When you stand up, everything stands up. The whole universe, metaverse. You help one person, all are helped. Now think of this from our ground of our being. From even a glimpse of this kind of realization, experientially, compassion infuses every moment in time and space, just like the verse says, like branching streams in the darkness. We can walk through sickness and see medicine, and know in an ever more resonant way how to heal ourselves and others in our words and actions. Yes. And. So I'm also very proud to work with another student. I'm going to close with a poem that he just wrote. This is Nick Thurston. And I think it does a good job, I hope, maybe, just bringing this all together. He called it Spring Bean Sprouts. Everything is alive in exactly the same way. The bean sprouts are alive as bean sprouts. The rhythmic beeping of trucks backing up in the construction site is alive in the exact same way as my pen skating across the smooth surface of the paper. When seen through the eyes of the heart, all differences are resolved. And my aching heart, that longs for it knows not what, is free to ache in peace. That's the poem. And just to acknowledge this deeply aching heart. Aching for what? Longing for what? Who knows? And yet we all know this ache intimately. And when we really look into it, we know that it aches for peace, for justice, and that capital L, love, for all beings, for the end to hate, violence, decimation of the planet and her beings. When we taste this ache and this deeper knowing fully, we can lose ourselves completely. And each moment is a precious, new now in which we are free to respond out of wisdom, out of compassion, right from where we sit, the home of the free. So, yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much for this shared Dharma, shared practice, shared hearts.